Hello everyone, my name is Denise and today I'll be talking on the topic external validation versus internal validation. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right in. So external validation is when you do a good piece of work, you send it to your boss or your supervisor, and your boss gives you a thumbs up, and then you feel a dopamine rush and you are happy. Internal validation is when you do a good piece of work, you self-evaluate and you realize that, oh, this is a good piece of work. You give yourself the thumbs up, you get a dopamine rush and you feel happy. So a lot of people, especially in modern culture, tend to say that it's very good to be 100% internally validated and not externally validated at all. So that is good in the sense that it gives you autonomy and helps you to live a life that is more driven by your own personal values. But it's bad because then you may not be open to correction and to any positive feedback, and you cannot really improve in mastery through that route as well. So I think the correct way is to have a good balance between both, mostly internally validated, but also a bit of external validation. Okay. But still, there is also a chunk of people who rely too much on external validation, and that can be very destructive. So I'll be talking a bit more about that right now. So let's talk about external validation. Okay, so you do a good piece of work, you send it to your boss gives you a thumbs up, and then you feel a dopamine rush and you're happy, right? But actually, it may not have to be a boss. It can be a different form of validation, like it can be from social media, your crowd of friends who are your friends on social media. They'll form the boss figure, will give you the validation that will make you feel happy and feel fulfilled and accomplished at that time. Okay, but unfortunately, it's not so good to rely entirely on the crowd, because the crowd, especially behind the protection of social media, or sometimes behind the shroud of anonymity, might actually lean into the collective shadow and do things that are not so aligned to the correct values. For example, a woman might be quite attractive, she's young, a teenager, and she realizes that when she posts a beautiful picture of herself dressed skimpily, she gets a lot of likes. And because she's very externally validated, she might keep dressing down and more sexually provocative to get more and more likes. And people might, they might, because we are so complex, there might be a part of us that is more base and like to indulge in lust, and that we might, just give you a like. But that just belongs to one part of us. And after that we like, and it's behind the cloak of autonomy or like anonymity, we might just go back and do our virtuous acts, so-called living out our not so socially acceptable impulses vicariously on that person that we like. So that person lapping up all our external validation becomes more and more like a puppet for us to project our shadow upon. Okay, so like I put here, if you rely entirely on external validation and likes on Facebook or Instagram, then there's a risk of you becoming a puppet of the culture, and not only the culture but the dark collective shadow of the culture. So by crowd pleasing, you might be helping other people obtain some kind of relief for their shadow, but you yourself become the scapegoat ultimately. Because eventually there'll be one point that they'll point their finger at you and say that I'm a good person, you are the one who's so lack of self-respect, stuff like that, and that will be crushing for you eventually if you rely too much on external validation, because that will be the opposite of external validation, right? There'll be people putting you down. And such a person, if you rely too much on external validation, you might also start to lack your personal direction. You don't know where you're going, you're just being led by the puppeteers behind the scenes who are just voting with their likes. So then you are like, what am I gonna do if there's no social media, there's no 100,000 fans guiding my next move? What am I going to say next? Then you don't really have a clear direction in your life, and you don't feel like you are self-deterministic. You feel quite lost, and that can precipitate into depression and all that. Okay, so I'm just going to go on a tangent and talk about a very related topic, but slightly on a tangent, like nature versus nurture. Okay, so for example, if I saw a really young boy, maybe 10 years old, and he comes to me and he tells me that he's a prodigy. Although he's 10 years old, he's already has a grade 8 in playing the cello, the double bass. Maybe double bass is too big for him. The violin. It's just this music prodigy. So as an adult, as a person who's been educated and all that, I would think, okay, nature versus nurture. Are your parents very good in music? What about your siblings? So that question basically leads back to genetics. Like, okay, you have been gifted genetically by your parents this gift, and that's why you are the way you are. You are a music prodigy. Then maybe the next question I'll be asking will be, you must have a really talented teacher who really knows how to coach you. So that would be about nurture, right? Nature versus nurture. So everybody's sort of like, okay, that totally makes sense. They don't really question it. But there's a problem with this line of thinking because it robs the child of any real credit. Like, you might have a great set of genes and you've got a great mentor, but you have to still put in the effort, otherwise you'll not be good in your music, right? So where does the individual come in? Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so first let me just give an exposition of nature versus nurture. So nature talks about genetics. It will determine your height and weight mostly. Okay, but you might have a set of genes, but if you keep jumping, doing a lot of gymnastics exercise and eat very well, you'll be taller than you'll reach your full genetic potential, just saying. It also determine your lifespan, your proclivity to diseases, right? That's why when you fill up insurance forms, they will ask you, have your parents or your grandparents died of blah 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 disease, because it does lead to, your genes will actually determine your proclivity to, your predisposition for certain diseases. And also family tree. So on this family tree thing, there is this interesting practice that a lot of career counselors do. They ask you to draw their family tree, and they say, oh, you come from a family of doctors. It shows that you've got the doctor blood in your gene. Okay, they may not say that explicitly, but it will be implicit. Or you come from a family of businessmen. So that is actually in your nature. There are some traits in your genes that will make you predisposed to being a good businessman. How about thinking about going on that path? Or if you choose to go to a different path, what is your justification? Okay, so that's actually the root of why people do family tree. They talk about your nature. So talk about nurture, things like education, like your religion, the books that you read, the mentors that you choose, the kind of exercise, like I told you, your genes, but with exercise you can determine your height, and culture at large. So that would be nurture. So when I go back to the example about the 10-year-old boy who's a music prodigy, yes, there's also nature and nurture. Okay. Okay. So but there is still a third element that I really don't want to discount that, and a lot of those people who study mythology, like, okay, from Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, there is a third element to it, which is there is nature, there is nurture, and then there is you. You have your personal choices to make. You have a set of genes that you really have no control over, and you have nurture, which you have a bit of control over because you have your own choices to make. You can choose how much exercise you want to do, which mentors you pick, which school you want to study in, which major you want to study on. So those are things that you can have a bit of control, but there's also you. It's like back to the choices of the boy who has to practice the violin maybe 5 hours a day. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't be a prodigy. So there is a part of it which is determined by that person as well. So it's not totally nature or nurture. Okay, how does the nurture build back to external validation? A big part of how our new burgeoning up and coming generations are being nurtured is through social media, right? They are getting direction from social media, like what is socially acceptable, what is not, based on the number of likes they get, or when they go onto a page of a celebrity, this celebrity is getting likes for or dressing this way, talking this way, and then so I need to emulate that. So that is a way that they're being nurtured as well. So one of the decisions that you can make is, what kind of celebrity do you want to imbibe? What kind of information do you want to to imbibe, and which one do you want to block away. So that will affect your nurturance. Okay, so back to that puppet idea. If you rely too much on culture, which is these days social media is a big player, then there's a risk of you becoming an avatar of culture, which means that if you're 100% externally motivated, then you'll just be driven by the number of likes that you get or number of likes that you observe other people getting, and then, okay, so culture likes this right now. This is the trend right now. The Kardashians, they do all the plastic surgery to make their lips very thick. So that is the thing that's in trend right now. I'm going to do that. Before even evaluating if that's what you really want, or will it be trendy next year, in 10 years time, or when you grow old, what will happen to your face? Will you age gracefully? All these questions never pop your mind. You are just driven 100% by that dopamine rush that you get instantly once you do the procedure, post that photograph, and then get 100 likes or something like that. So that's not very good, huh? Okay, so it is time to stop, to pull the brakes, and just really stop and pause to think about where do you want to go next. If you are the person who is very externally validated. Okay. Firstly, you need to find out what your values are, because there's nature, there's nurture, and then there's you. You are the player. Maybe nature and nurture in part determines the deck of cards you have in your hands now, but then you, as the player, you get to choose how to play the game. Okay, so that involves pausing and thinking and using strategy instead of just going with the flow, shutting down your thinking and just going, letting the likes lead you to whatever direction that they lead you. Okay, and what do you stand for? What do you want to stand for? For example, this is possible. It could possibly happen. Maybe I went on, I'm in part of a social media kind of a group, and in that group they like to validate a particular kind of, let's say I'm in a group of counselors, and they say, okay, the trend now is choice theory reality therapy, so go and learn that, Denise. So I say, okay, fine, since 100 people asked me to learn that, I'm going to learn that. So I went and signed up for the CTRT group, and lo and behold, I realized that in the group the people are not very nice to me. They are quite harsh to me. They don't care about my feelings, and they don't live aligned to the CTRT principles. So if I am externally motivated and I'm only there solely because of the 100 people on social media who encourage me to go, then I will probably just drop out, because the external motivation is not strong enough to give me grit, to help me persevere. But let's say if I was motivated to join the CTRT group because I read the book, I practiced the philosophy, and it really worked on me. I'm a counselor. When I use my amateur CTRT training, I can actually really help some people. Then I'll be motivated to keep going, even if the environment is not so pleasant at this moment. I'll try to work out my relationships there, because now there is a more solid core, which is my internal motivation that's driving me forward. Even though my external environment, the immediate external environment, is becoming harsh, that will give me grit, give me perseverance, because now I've got passion. Okay, I'll talk more about that later. Okay, so before that, if you are the type that tends to go with the flow and just swim with your feelings, then you might not really want to pause and really think. So pausing and thinking can become something scary, because you might be distracting yourself, with posting beautiful pictures of yourself, getting a lot of validation on Facebook. You might be distracting yourself eating a lot of yummy food, going partying, going on fun trips, going holidaying. So the act of just pausing, being in silence and asking yourself, what do I really want, and to self-evaluate can be scary. But that is good, because that's the first step to finding out what you stand for, what are your internal values, what are your true passions. Okay? So what I'm saying here, you need to pause and self-evaluate. What do you want? What do I want in the long term? You can ask yourself that. So am I going in the right direction? Am I going the wrong direction right now? So what are some other things that I need now to get me to where I want to go? It can be like getting a new mentor to help you, enrolling in a new class, getting a new job to get the resources to pay for the classes. But you cannot do any of these if you don't even pause to ask yourself, what do I want? Where do I want to be maybe in next year or 5 years time? Something like that. Instead of what can I do now to get the most likes on Facebook in the next hour? That's a very short-term goal, huh? Okay, finally, let's talk about greed. Greed is passion plus perseverance. Okay, so in order to have greed, you need to know what you are truly passionate about, which is a passion that is nested within you, that cannot be determined by external validation. It has to be within you. So, and to persevere even in the face of difficulty, you need to truly enjoy the activity. Okay, and it helps if you are really talented, but that is not the only determinant. You can have really little talent, but you like it so much, and your internal motivation is so strong, you keep practicing, then you get better. Okay, and then finally the quote: anyone can become an expert if you put in enough hours of deliberate targeted practice. So I saw that in the BBC video. I might link that below later, you can watch it, about the difference between anyhow practice versus deliberate practice. So for example, you're playing tennis and you keep playing it in a not so good way, your regular way of playing tennis, which is just to get your regular partner and you just bounce the ball back and forth. So after 10 years, you're still going to be at that level, which is like the amateur level. But deliberate practice is very different because it involves you having a coach to just stand there and spot your mistakes and fix a particular way. Maybe today I'll work on my serving, to serve in this way, and then maybe next session we practice a different way. So you train deliberately the correct techniques, and you train it until you are so good at it. So if you do that and you have this coach or this mentor there to spot your mistakes and help you, then after 10 years you're going to be an expert. But if you don't and you're just like swinging the ball around anyhow, then in 10 years you'll be the expert of swinging the ball around anyhow. So having a mentor to guide you is very important. So why am I saying that? I guess that's why for me, at least personally as Denise, I tend to be very mindful about the mentors I choose in every field of my life, whether it's personal life, in my counseling practice, or even spiritually, my spiritual director. I want to find somebody who can really guide me and give me constructive feedback, and I want to always be practicing the correct way of doing things so that I become an expert. Okay, so I hope that this video has been helpful for you. To summarize, it's important to have a mixture of external validation versus internal. If you have too much internal validation without any regard to external validation, there's a risk of you becoming narcissistic and isolated. That's not so good. But the societal trend now points towards people relying too much on external validation, so that's not so good. So that it was actually the chunk of my whole video, talking about how to switch back to more internal validation. And then there is nature and nurture, yes, but that's not all. There's still you. There's still you who can decide what to do with this deck of cards that you have, what game to play. So there's so much more that you can do. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. If it has been, kindly press the like button and share it with your friends and press subscribe. Thank you so much and God bless.